This section is titled Transition to Algebra and deals with changing algebraic expressions or algebraic equations. So first of all, let's talk about the difference between those two. An algebraic expression does not have an equal sign, and it can't be solved for a variable. An example of an algebraic expression would be something like a plus a negative 3. A plus a negative 3 can't be solved for a. You can, if you want to, say, what is this expression equal to if I let a equal something? For instance, if I said, well, if a is equal to 5, what is a plus a negative 3? I would just put 5 in for the a. I would get 5 plus a negative 3. So this expression, a plus a negative 3, in that particular case, would be equal to 2. On the other hand, an algebraic equation does have an equal sign, and it can be solved for a variable. If you were given a plus 7 is equal to negative 14, now I have an algebraic equation because I have an equal sign. And I can go through and I can solve that. In order to solve that, I could go through and I could take 7 away from both sides. And if I take 7 away from both sides, I'm left with a is equal to a negative 21. There is only one answer for a in this particular algebraic equation because of the way it's written, and I was able to go through and figure out what the answer was. Before we begin writing algebraic expressions from words, let's look at some common math words that are used for the 4 different operations. You can see that for each one of the 4, I put 3 or 4 different words, common words that are used. So for addition, if you hear the word sum, plus, or increased by, that generally means addition. I'm going to underline the word sum because sum is the most important math word that is there. For subtraction, difference, minus, decreased by, and less than. And once again, I'm going to underline the word difference, which is the math word meaning subtraction. For multiplication, product, times, of, and by, and I'll underline product. And for division, quotient, divided, and into. And once again, quotient is the main math word that you will see as you are working through this particular section. Here are some examples of changing words into algebraic expressions. The first one, the sum of x and y. Sum means addition. So, for that particular one, I could write x plus y. In this particular case, because it doesn't matter, because addition is commutative, it can be x plus y, I could also write y plus x, and it would not matter. For 7 more than b, if I want 7 more than b, I would have b plus 7. Once again, though, if I wanted to, I could say 7 plus b, because addition is commutative. The third one that I have, x decreased by 5. I have x, I want to decrease it by 5. So I have x subtract 5. This is one case in which I cannot write it as 5 subtract x. I can't do that because subtraction is not commutative. It does not mean the same thing. I have x and I want to decrease it by 5, so my answer does have to be x subtract 5. The fourth one I have, the product of 3 and m, I could write it as 3 times m, and I put a dot there to indicate the multiplication sign, but you would not see it written that way. Instead, you would just see it written 3m, because if there is no sign between a number and the variable, or actually even just in between two variables, it's understood to be multiplication. So you're going to see that written in the book as just 3m. Once again, though, because multiplication is commutative, I could also write it m3 Generally, you would not see that. It would certainly, if you had written it that way, if you wrote it that way, it would be considered correct, but generally the number comes first. So you would probably see this written as 3m instead of m3. The last one, the quotient when b is divided by 2. Quotient means division, so I want b divided by 2. If I wanted to, I could also write it as a fraction, b divided by 2 that way. So either one of these would work. But remember, once again, division is not commutative. So I could not do 2 divided by b. That would not be correct. I could also not write it as a fraction, 2 divided by b, because this says the quotient when b is divided by 2. As you are working through the homework on this section, oftentimes you will see that there are 2 operations in the same expression. And here are 4 different examples. The first one, 3 times the sum of m and n. If I want 3 times the sum of m and n, I need the sum of m and n, which would be m plus n, and then I need to multiply that by 3. 3 times this sum is what that is saying. The second one, the sum of 3 times m and n, and m and n. The sum of 3 times m, here's 3m, and n, so I want 3m plus n. I wanted the sum of 3 times m and n. And the and really separates those 2 different parts of that expression that I have. The third one, the quotient of a plus b divided by 5. So I know I'm going to need a quotient, and I need a plus b divided by 5. And there's my quotient, because quotient is division. The quotient of a plus b, here's a plus b, divided by 5. And then the last one, the product of x plus y and x minus y. So I know I need multiplication. X plus y would be written this way. X minus y would be written this way. And I want the product of the 2. So I'm going to be multiplying those. The product of x plus y and x minus y. And it is multiplication. Once again, I could, if I wanted to, put a little dot there to indicate multiplication. I could put an x, although that would get confusing because I'm using an x for a variable as well. Generally, though, you would not see anything there. There's an understood multiplication sign in there. You will often see formulas written out in words, especially with geometry formulas, and we'll need to change those into algebraic expressions as well. And here are some examples. So each one of these is actually a formula for finding the area or the volume or something of a geometric figure. The first one, length times width. It's just easy. You could put down that it would be LW. And you could make up the symbols that you want to use for length times width. It makes sense to use the L and the W. So it would be LW. Once again, I could put, if I wanted to, a multiplication sign in there, but there's no need to do that. The second one that I have, 1/2 the altitude times the base. If I have 1/2 the altitude, I'm going to have 1/2 of the altitude. I'm going to express altitude with an A times the base. Once again, I could put times b if I wanted to. I could also get rid of that. I could just have 1/2 AB that particular way. Or the other thing I could say is I could say 1/2 the altitude times the base. I want the altitude times the base, and I want half of that, so I'm going to divide it by 2. I could write that any one of those 3 ways. The next one that I have, pi times the radius squared. The symbol for pi looks like that. I want times the radius squared, so it would just be pi r squared. And that is the formula for the area of a circle. And then the fourth one that I have, 4/3 times pi times the cube of the radius. It would just be 4/3 times pi times the cube of the radius. Cube means I'm going to take it to the third power, so it's 4/3 pi r cubed. And that's the formula for the volume of a sphere. Throughout this course and subsequent math courses, you will have to translate from words into algebraic expressions or equations many times. Please let me know if there is anything I can do to help as you work on these concepts.